Okay, thank you very much. Good morning, all in Belize and from wherever you're connecting right now. Thank you for being in this very first webinar or online seminar implemented in the framework of the project Transformation to an Open Public Administration in Belize, implemented by the Trust for the Americas and the Department for Effective Public Management of the OAS with the support of the Embassy of the United States of America in Belize. This first webinar, it's intended for participants of the Open Government Belize ecosystem. Thank you for joining us. Right now, we're joined online and also on-site in Belize City, where our team members in Belize are right now currently with a group of participants at this very moment. In that on-site venue, we have the project team, Ms. Audrey Robin and Ms. Melanie Barnes. They both will leave their contact information on the chat if you have any questions, if you want to follow up about the project. They'll be your points of contact, and of course we will see you there in Belize once we travel to the many activities that we will have throughout the year there. So the objective of these webinars are to build capacities and raise awareness about the rules and guidelines for participants of the multi-stakeholder open government Belizean ecosystem when engaging in formal open government co-creation processes such as national action open government plans. So just by introducing this session, I want to invite all participants, all Belizeans interested in pursuing open government, supporting it, to tune yourself to the presentations that we're about to hear with a mindset of trying to think about how you can take advantage of open government from the standpoint of what you do, your institution, your job, your organization, your needs in your community or your institution. That's something very important as we implement this series of 3 webinars. We actually invite you not only to be here today, but also join us the next 2 following weeks to complete this session of webinars that are intended to, in a programmatic way, provide knowledge and improve the knowledge as well as to how to participate in open government and how to participate in the processes of developing national action plans as well. So stay tuned for the next 3 weeks, including this one, for that to happen. But as the presenters go on their presentations, we invite you to reflect about your own reality in your communities, in your surroundings, in your institutions, so that you can start thinking about how to activate open government. Therefore, the reason why we're asking that with this project is because of these seminars, is because we are, or the project is intended to support the development of the very first open government national action plan in Belize. And so we want you to participate on that process that will start actually next month. We will share information about it. So these webinars will be a good starting point for you to begin thinking about how you can insert your input in that process. That will begin next month, as I said, and that will take a few months throughout this year. So stay tuned with that and make sure that you can connect and reflect throughout the presentations. So the presentations today will be given by 2 key actors worldwide in the pursuit of open government. Those are the OGP, the Open Government Partnership, and the Government of Canada. I say key actors because, of course, the Open Government Partnership plays a key role in the pursuit and implementation of open government as the main body worldwide in charge of the open government as a platform. And we have, for that, Pepe Garcia connected here, and Gustavo Perez, who will introduce us to what has happened in open government since inception to now, and give us a good insight about things that happen around the world that perhaps may be of interest in Belize. Um, that presentation will be followed by a presentation of the government of Canada, and for that we have um, online representatives from the Treasury Board Secretariat of Canada, that's TBS, and we do have the key of officers who are in charge of pursuing open government in Canada. They are Sarah Berube and Benoit Frenet. They both will be talking about their experience, not only implementing as Canada, but when I said they're a key actors worldwide, Canada has had a key role in the pursuit and the promotion of open government as a chair of the Open Government Partnership as well, together with what Pepe and Gustavo will tell us about today. So they do have a broad experience on this, and we're highly glad to have those two optics brought to you in this webinar. So thank you very much. Without further ado, I want to give the floor to the microphone to Pepe Garcia, who will start the presentation from the OGP, alternating with Gustavo Perez. Thank you to both, and just open your mic, and the time is now yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike. Thank you, everybody, for being here. We are very excited of talking to the Belize open government ecosystem and the relevant stakeholders, because we are confident that we can follow the steps to get Belize into the open government partnership, if that's the road you decide nationally. Because like open government, it's not like a patent or something that belongs to the OGP. Any government, any coalition with civil society can promote openness in certain policy areas, sometimes in small policies, sometimes in national planning processes. And what we do is to systematize those methodologies and to promote one specific methodology that helps us make governments accountable and open by definition to civil society and to other social stakeholders. So what I will try to make a small introduction on the Open Government Partnership, and tell you what are the challenges that we see from this international platform in the countries and in the region, as well as some thematic approaches that could inspire you in this first process, and even for your first national action plan, if that was the case for this year. So I wanted to first to give you the basic details of the OGP, the Open Government Partnership. It's an international multi-stakeholder platform to make governments more accountable, inclusive, and responsive to citizens. So it's basically a space that can be and should be used to promote co-creative solutions to public problems. It's not constrained to one thematic or a group of teams. It can be used and applied in everything that the government and the society in a certain country want to talk about. So it was founded in 2011 by 8 governments and 9 civil society leaders. So from the beginning, this is sorry, do you hear me now?
Yes, maybe just perhaps a little louder or closer to your mic.
Okay.
But I take the opportunity to ask participants to increase the volume as well if you need it during this presentation.
Okay,
Thank you.
and I also apologize because Gustavo and we have to leave very well, in time, so he will leave just after we finish our presentation, and I can stay a little bit longer, but I would love to read your questions and to give you my contact in case you want to write me or go through the presentations and the materials that I will share at the end of this talk. Um, so please interrupt me if you don't listen to me, or if I need to speak louder, please. So I was telling you that since the beginning, the Open Government Partnership was created with civil society. It's not a government initiative, it's a civil society plus government initiative. Open government for our OGP model needs the involvement totally, the total participation of civil society organizations. So now we have 78 national members, 20 local governments, and thousands of civil society organizations that are working on this platform and developing over 4,000 commitments to date. The steering committee that takes the big decisions inside the OGP platform is composed by 11 governments and 11 civil society leaders, and they rotate and they are changing. So leadership, it's always getting refreshed, but always with this balance between government and civil society, and that's what we try to keep in every step of the process, including the national action, well, the national multi-stakeholder forums, or for example, like a steering committee, or these groups that takes the decision for the whole national platform, should include always the participation of civil society organizations and relevant actors. As I was telling you, we have more than 200 national action plans. Some of the countries of the member countries are working in their 4th national action plan. We have more than 4,000 commitments. These commitments are the unit of analysis, like the concrete strategy to solve one problem that it's planned and followed up inside the Open Government Initiative. For example, let's say that we are working on improve the daycare services for children in a country. So we understand the problem, and then the government agencies related to that problem, responsible for solving or implementing a policy to improve the daycare services, make a commitment in team with the civil society organizations that are participating in the mechanisms, and they both follow up this commitment along the 2-year action plan. So that's why we are always focusing on the commitments, and this is important for you to keep in mind, because at the same time that you are working on an open process and an open dialogue to engage in this international platform, the multi-stakeholder forums in the countries have to think thematically, have to select their battles, the prioritary topics in which they will be working and developing concrete commitments. In this presentation, we have some examples of different concrete commitments and policy areas that have been developed in recent, well, in Ukraine. ProZorro, their online platform to disclose all procurement contracts, was developed inside the OGP initiative. In the United Kingdom, for example, they implemented a public register for beneficial owners of British companies to disclose who ultimately owns, and controls and benefits from them. In Nigeria, we have a project named Eyes and Ears that enlists citizens to monitor government infrastructure. In Georgia, we have a commitment about publishing searchable political party financing to track the donors and the political parties and where do their incomes and their donations come from, and if there is certain relationship with the public or the public procurement and the contracts. In Chile, there was the creation of a National General Attorney's Office, an independent prosecutor's office, an Access to Information Act, anti-money laundering reform, and multiple efforts to regulate politics in Chile. And for example, now in Mexico, there's a commitment about making transparent and to understand and regulate or try to regulate arms trafficking, to understand that huge regional phenomenon that it's common for Central America and certainly one of the security concerns in Mexico. So this platform can be as wide and open as the local actors and the government and civil society organizations determine. Actually, the vision for the future for OGP is that it has to make concrete democracy in the countries beyond the ballot box. Our CEO, Sanjay Pradhan, he talks about democracy beyond the ballot box, referring to OGP as a concrete alternative for governments and civil society to push forward reforms and projects in this co-creation methodology and environment. So the challenge now is to make OGP a vibrant platform for different social movements and thematics that are being discussed and that require collaborative focus to be solved. And we are trying to open this platform for this to happen inside the OGP. So what we offer, it's a genuine partnership. At the model, it's based on three tenets. A genuine partnership between an equal members of the government and civil society that work together to co-create these action plans by 2-year action plans. The other tenet of the model is ambitious action, opening the door to different thematics and national priorities, and also encouraging that the countries improve in their ambition and their focus on any issue, like to make it bigger and like more deep. And we also facilitate peer learning and exchange inside the community. And finally, the other characteristic of OGP's model is that it's verifiable, because it requires, well, self-assessment, and we have an independent reporting mechanism that basing on that accountability aspect, we are not only best practices community that leads by the example of the countries that are making efforts and getting concrete commitments, but we also provide a clear guidance of what are the best practices, what are the rules, and if the countries are following the rules to make their national actions plans through the IRM. So as you see, OGP provides a platform to work on a 2-year basis with consecutive action plans that allow the government and the civil society organizations to focus or to make relevant efforts for this period of time, and then start again with different topics or with the same topics, but we're trying to to learn from their previous experiences and involving and engaging more civil society organizations to achieve more legitimacy and better outcomes for these policy processes. So this will be the basics on OGP, and I will give the word to Gustavo, who will talk to you about the independent reporting mechanism.
Thanks, Pepe. Yes, I just wanted to briefly just comment on the IRM and the work that we do and how that complements, I guess, OGP process as a whole. So as Pepe was mentioning, the IRM is the accountability arm of OGP. As you might know, when countries become members of OGP, they adhere to an open government declaration. And they're also required to follow some steps, a specific set of steps that are actually have been agreed upon by the steering committee, so the governing body of OGP. And what the IRM does is make sure that countries are being compliant with these standards and requirements throughout the process. And we do so with a specific methodology that we have put together and have been using for the past years since the IRM started, I guess, just a year after OGP began. So we want to look into how the countries are performing in terms of their action plan, both creation process or the development of the action plan itself, and also we want to look at how they implement these commitments within an action plan. So we split these requirements in two types, according to what actually the steering committee has proposed. But first, we want to know, in the process of development of the action plan and implementation of the action plan, what we want to look into is whether it's the level and the quality of participation that civil society members provide within the process itself and the public in general. What was their possibility to influence the commitments themselves when they're designed. So these policy areas that Pepe was talking about before. So for instance, if it's a commitment on opening data, for example, in the budgetary process, we want to know whether the formulation of that commitment actually involved the public and civil society in getting it together. So we do look whether there is leadership of civil society in the formulation of these commitments themselves and also in its implementation. And then the second part is we want to assess also the quality of these commitments or reforms themselves. Basically, we look at whether they are well designed as a product, whether you can see that it has concrete activities that will lead to a specific ambitious results. And then we also want to see if they actually were implemented and if they have brought about change in open government policies. So for example, has the implementation of commitments meant more information being distributed on the ground to citizens? Has it meant that there are more spaces for civic participation and influencing decision-making processes? Or has it meant that there is now more spaces for public accountability, where, for example, the government is required to respond to criticisms from citizens? Or so these are these mechanisms in place as well as a result of the implementation of the action plan. So after we've conducted this assessment, what we do is that we provide country stakeholders, both government and civil society organizations or others that are interested or they're interested parties. We provide this information currently in the form of reports with concrete recommendations that hopefully help stakeholders improve their way towards an open government in future cycles. So when they resume the co-creation of a new action plan, perhaps they can take upon these recommendations and improve in the process. That is our aim, so basically playing that dual role of compliance of rules and standards that are quite clear in terms of what you have to produce as part of the OGP, and then also that other role of enabling learning and discussion through these findings that we produce. So that's basically the IRM's involvement, and we join the process, or we accompany the process in several moments of the action plan implementation plan. And hopefully countries here can provide some more information on how that's done. But that's basically it. Pepe, back to you.
Yes, sure. I'm still here. Mike, I just wanted to apologize to everybody as we cannot just like stay for the whole dialogue. But this is not the only webinar that will be talking about this. This is just a brief introduction, very brief, because if we manage to get into the GP like with Guatemala, you will be hearing a lot from me, and I will be working with you uh, on a regular basis. So please feel free to send us your questions with the chat or by email. I put my email in the last slide of the presentation, please, and we can go further and deeper in the next webinars. So I apologize because we have to run, but we will see each other next week.
Thank you, Pepe and Gustavo, very much for your participation. And yes, for all participants, just to let you know that Pepe will join us in the on-site activities that we will have next month in Belize. He will travel with us, with the OAS, the Trust, and other experts for the next activities that we have on-site. And I should mention that Pepe is the Senior Program Officer of Country Support, meaning is the lead officer from OGP for countries of North America, Central America, and the Caribbean. So he will have definitely, as he said, a hand on all the work, and thanks for the collaboration of OGP and yours, Pepe and Gustavo, as well in this process. So thank you very much. Participants had asked if the presentations will be shared and distributed, and the answer is yes, we will share and distribute it. You can find some links to these guiding materials on the presentation, for example, the OGP handbook, or the OGP participation and cooperation toolkit, or the global report, all three instruments that will be highly recommended and needed for the process that we're about to start in Belize next month in the co-creation of the Open Government National Action Plan. So thank you, Pepe and Gustavo, both. We'll collect questions for you. I will try to answer as many as possible if there's some directed specifically on OGP areas. Had the opportunity to work with OGP since the beginning of last decade, and so know quite a bit of everything there. Thank you very much to both.
Thank you, Mike.
Bye to everybody. See you soon.
Okay, so we will continue this webinar, and for the next presentation, we have the Government of Canada, specifically the Treasury Board of Canada Secretariat, TBS. For that, as I mentioned, we do have Sarah Berube and Benoit Frenet. Sarah is the lead open government person from the Government of Canada, acting as a focal point, point of contact of the Government of Canada to the OGP. So welcome to both, Sarah and Benoit. Feel free to start while I load your presentation. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you to welcome us with you today. And Sarah and I are very happy to be to join you. I know it's a long journey that you have in front of you. So we feel that we are very lucky to have a chance to help you and support you, or maybe to inspire you. So that would be the goal of this presentation. It would be very to inspire you, to give you to sharing the Canadian experience, as we can call, and to be really transparent with you, we'll say this is not always an easy road to be to open a government. Sometimes it could be a bumpy road, but it's a long and challenging process that needs to be that it needs a lot of dialogue, but at the end it's worthwhile. So here in Canada we're still trying to improve, but we are kind of advanced, and we like the way that that things are moving right now. So you see the presentation is a little bit government focused, but don't be shy to ask questions at the end if you have specific items that you want us to answer. So I will start with the journey that we had in Canada. So we launched our first portal, so the web-based portal in 2011. So that was really the start of our journey in open government. So it was more related at the time as open data, but we transitioned more to open government in the way. So we joined the Open Government Partnership in 2012. So this is where we did our first plan, and you will see with all the milestones, but the things that you should be aware of and see the progression that we have done with the collaboration with citizens is during the first National Action Plan, we did external consultation, and only 260 Canadian were consulted. For the last plan that we did, the fourth National Action Plan in 2018, we consulted 10,000 participants, so 10,000 Canadian for the creation of the plan. So when we say it's an evolving process, it's evolving here in government, but it's as well evolving in the society, so with Canadians, so they better understand what their role is and how they can have an active role in open government. Just to let you know, in 2017 we were elected to be part of the OGP steering committee, and we were asked to be the co-chair of the committee for 2018 and 2019. So we just finished our co-chairmanship last September. And because of this co-chairmanship, we had the opportunity to welcome the world in Ottawa last year. So we were proudly organized the OGP Global Summit in Ottawa. So it was a great experience. We welcomed more than 2,600 people and from 115 countries. So it was great for us. I would just say, so being part of the OGP and having a strong OGP platform give us the opportunity to make a major impact in the country. As a result, Canada now is first ranked globally, tied with the UK on the Open Data Barometer. And we can see now that people are more aware of open government, so we see the increase on monthly downloads of the datasets inside our online portal. We know that we have over 150 Canadian companies that are using open data for their businesses, and we have a rough calculation of the contribution of geospatial data that we have on the portal on the Canada's GDP. So it's currently estimated to around $700 million. So we can see that we can make a difference. So the presentation today, we divide it on 5 topics. So we want first to show you what is our definition of open government in Canada, what are the risks and opportunities for open government, what is the foundation here in Canada, we will explain a little bit our action plan and the work that we have in progress. So first, I will go with the definition of open government. So it's very important for when you start this journey to clearly understand and clearly define what is open government and what is the goal that you want to achieve. So for us, we really like the OECD definition. So as defined as a culture of governance based on innovation and sustainable public policies and practices, inspired by the principles of transparency, accountability, participation that foster democracy and inclusive growth. So I checked quickly on your Facebook page, and I saw that it's a little bit aligned with the keywords that you have. I saw that you have transparency, collaboration, and participation. So it's a little bit aligned with what you have right now. So for us, the two big word that we have in that is the culture. So we have to change the culture in government, I would say, as well as outside the government. So how can we use open government to empower the citizens to have a decision? So it's culture. So inside the government, I would say it's changing the way that we manage the data and the way that we engage citizens. And that's coming to my other buzzword. So participation is very important. So more and more we can see that the government is going to the citizen and trying to more engage for policy making. I will not go to the last part of the slide. It's a definition of OGP, as my colleagues already from OGP already did. So I will turn with Sarah now.
So you see the word on the presentation now. So why? And I think this is a question everybody has to ask themselves when they start a journey. And I think Belize is in this position right now where you have to find the reasons why you started to think about opening up government. And I think it's up to every country to find their why. Here in Canada, if we can talk about our own experience, the government priority. So we have mandate letters, which are documents in which the government states its forthcoming priorities for the next mandate. And in there, the Prime Minister is really clear that he expects his ministers to raise the bar on openness, effectiveness, and transparency in government. And maybe what is interesting regarding those mandate letters is that those documents were kept secret up until 2015, when the government decided to open it up. And then it created this momentum, because now citizens are able to see what are the priorities of our government, and they are able to track results and keep us accountable. So this is one of the reasons why we started to look into opening up our government. The second reason is that we realized that we're now in the age of where information is shared more quickly than ever. And as government, we really have to find a way to adapt ourselves. So the status quo right now is not sustainable for government, because if we're not able to keep pace with the requests of our citizens, we will lose their confidence. And right now, we're not able to provide services as the way Uber, Airbnb, and Netflix are able to provide services. And it is because we work in silos within government. We have this hierarchical management structure, and we are aware of this, and we're trying to break those silos in order to make the information flow freely in between teams, across departments, and even with civil society. Because opening up government is also being aware that civil society organizations and businesses have the expertise sometimes to take the data and the information that governments have and try to find solutions. And opening up government is also about having and engaging citizens in the policy development process, so that they feel they have a seat at the table and that their input is taken into account in what we develop as a government. Because everything that we have as a government, the information, actually belongs to citizens. We work for them. So this is the two main reasons why we started this journey on our side. And of course, there are some challenges and risks associated with opening up our government. The open by default mentality is not something that is natural for people to have. And this is where I really want to focus, is the change of culture is really core to our efforts, and it's actually one of the biggest challenges that we have, because you cannot change a culture from night to days. And we have three ways to do that. One of them is having a carrot, so having incentives to bring people to change their mind. The other tool that we have is using the stick. So when you have legislations, you can force people to do stuff that they wouldn't do otherwise. And the third tool that we have is to have a champion or an advocate that is able to spread the word and spread this to motivate people to change their behavior. And we're really looking, and I already mentioned it, to change the way public servants think about information. Because sharing information, yes, there are some risks attached to it, but it's also creating this trust relationship with citizens. And as I already mentioned, information that the government owns is actually information that belongs to citizens. And we work as public servants for the common good. So this is really what where we're at right now. And people and public servants thought that it was a fad back in 2012, that open government wouldn't stay, and we're in 2020 and it's still there, and we're trying to mainstreaming it. And I will go back to Benoit, and Benoit will explain what are the foundations here in Canada where everything started.
So yeah, the how is very important. So the way that we implement the open government it's critical. So here in Canada, we had some foundational element that we use to open the government, and you will see a little bit later on our plan how we use it to develop the commitments that we have it on our plan. So I will first start with the foundation of the open government in Canada. So we have an open government directive. This directive first requests all the department here in Canada to at the federal level to request to have the inventories of their data. So that was a very great exercise that helped them to understand what they have for data. Sometimes they don't realize that they have so many data that will be useful for the people outside the government. So that exercise helped them to understand, and we had great result following that, because right now in our portal we have 82,000 data set that are released. We are now in the process to update the directive, and we'll make sure that the open government is known perfectly inside all the federal department. We'll create some roles and responsibilities so that will empower more the department to be more active on open government. So I would just go through quickly our open government portal. So this is the main tool that we are using to not to engaging, but to show data to provide data to the citizen. So right now, as I said before, we launched the portal in 2011. That was the first step that we take in this long journey. The intention was to create a one-stop shop for all the open information and open data. It was built on open source tools, so the codes are freely shared and reused. So we have over 150 federal institutions, and we receive 150,000 visits in average a month. As I said, we have 82,000 open data set, and now with the new access to information legislature that just passed, we have the proactive disclosure records went up to 1.2 million of those records, so divided in 10 categories. So this is how this is the information that is in the portal right now. So just quickly, this slide is just for you to, if you want to have a quick access to all the data. But the thing is, I should highlight is this is the data for the federal government only. Provincials, we have most of our provincial government that already have a portal. They have their own data set that they are publishing in their portal. So now we are working with them at the provincial level, so to have a multi-jurisdiction access to the data. So we are trying to federate their data to our portal, and we are working on to have it on the two-way, so our data will be accessible in their portal as well. So that will make the life easier for Canadians that wants to have access to one data. They will just have to want to go to one website and not go to 10 or 11 websites. So that will ease the process and will make it easier for the Canadian. So this is the view that you have when you go to our portal. So I will not go too much in detail, but you can see that we divided in some teams to make it easier for the people to that has access to find what they are looking for. We're currently trying to improve the system, so we are creating personas that will have different type of persons that will make it easier for the people to find exactly the kind of data that they would like to have. The last slide on the portal, again, I would not go technical, but this is the kind of information that you have as well to at another level. And we here in Canada trying to keep this portal an evergreen tool. So we are adapting it with the user feedback and with the data owner feedback as well. So to make sure that it's very useful for the users. So I'll turn back with Sarah with the engagement cycle that we have here in Canada.
So what Benoit presented was really the foundations of what we have here in Canada so that we can open up government on the long term. So the portal is one of the tools that we have as well to give the information and data to citizens. Another tool that we have, and Gustavo and Pepe mentioned it already in their presentation, we have the co-creation process because every 2 years, because we're a member of the Open Government Partnership, we have to create this national action plan. It's part of one of the requirements of being a member of the organization, and the co-creation process is also a requirement. So, like as Benoit mentioned already, we saw an increase in Canadian participation from 260 participants back in 2012 to 10,000 in 2018. And I just wanted to outline that, you know, the presentation, so the image that you see on the screen right now is really a result of 3 consultations that we did between 2012 and 2016. So this is a result when, you know, we started our consultations back in 2016. We really wanted to have a clear vision of where we wanted to go, and it resulted in 6 clear steps. The first one is planning. Planning consultation, it may seem a little bit irrational or maybe not logical, but actually it's a really good step and good practice to have. And we're actually doing pre-consultation right now for our 5th National Action Plan because we really want to target those people that we want to engage during our consultation process, because sometimes those people have expertise and we really want to pick their brain on a couple of commitments that we might be looking into for the 5th National Action Plan. So when we're really planning the consultations, the next stage would be to shape the plan. And shaping is really going out there, talk to citizens. We have multiple channels. We do it through in-person workshops. We do it on our portal. We have a comment section. We have tweets. We also have an online platform for our consultations. So all those means are used for us to gather input from citizens, civil society organizations, the private sector, and then we will write what we heard report and try to analyze the data that we gathered and then start to draft commitments based on what we heard. So this is the 3rd step. And then when we're done with the drafting process, we go back to stakeholders and ask them to review what we have written. And then the last stage is really to finalize our national action plan and send it for approval, because when you're a member of the Open Government Partnership, you have a ministerial point of contact and you also have a working level point of contact. So you need to have the political approval and the political buy-in to back you. And at the same time, they're also great champion to promote the National Action Plan across the government. And then the next step is implementing our National Action Plan. And this is kind of a virtuous circle because you implement the action plan and then you track results. And we receive, and I will talk about it later on, the Independent Review Mechanism report. That is also a tool offered by the Open Government Partnership, where you have a researcher looking at our National Action Plan and providing input and recommendations for us to improve for the next one. So this is like if I can give you a big overview of what was our consultation process here in Canada. There is also another mean for us to consult civil society, and it's the multi-stakeholder forum. And the multi-stakeholder forum is a requirement from the OGP because we need to identify as a country a way to consult when we co-create. And back in 2016, we decided to include this requirement in our national action plan. And it was also an independent review mechanism report recommendation that Canada should launch a multi-stakeholder forum. So we took that really seriously, and back in 2018, we launched that forum, and it was a result of a co-creation process as well with the Canadian Open Government Civil Society Network. So this civil organization in Canada and the Government of Canada worked alongside to co-create the terms of reference of the multi-stakeholder forum. And then after that, we launched a call for applications, and we recruited the members of that forum together. So this forum consists of 12 members, 8 members from the civil society and 4 members of the Government of Canada. And they were involved in our consultation process for the 4th National Action Plan back in 2012. But because we had started the consultation process earlier on, they were really involved at the design phase and the review phase of a National Action Plan. So this is a good practice to have as a member country to really ensure that you have civil society organization working with you and having a dialogue on a daily and maybe regular basis. So I talked a little bit about our consultation process that led to our 4th National Action Plan. And our 4th National Action Plan started back in 2018 up until 2020. And we really decreased the number of commitments that we had, because in our 3rd National Action Plan, we had 22 commitments. And now we have 10. And it is really easier for us to track our results in that way, because we have to report quarterly on those commitments. And under each commitment that you see there, you have milestones. And for each milestones, you have a lead department, and you have a starting date and you have a end date. So it's really a good way for us to know where we're at and where we need to put more efforts to achieve the results that we are committed to. And if I can go really quickly to explain a couple of those commitments, because they might be of interest to you. So the first one is your user-friendly open government. And we think that people and citizens engage in an easier manner when the platform is user-friendly. So we're really trying to improve our open data, so the open.canada.ca portal that you saw earlier on in the presentation. We also have this healthy democracy commitment, where we're looking at how information is spread in the digital space. And with the G7, with our G7 counterparts, we launched the rapid response mechanism back in 2018, really to identify threats to democracy when we have elections. We also undertook a review of our Access to Information Act, and we actually adopted those amendments back in June 2019, and Benoit will talk about that later on in the presentation. And we have also engaged with our Indigenous people here to look at how they can have more sovereignty and how they can have ownership over their own data. And we also launched back in May 2019, when we had the Open Government Global Summit here in Ottawa, a toolkit for gender-based analysis for open government. So it's really a way to look at how we can include minorities and underrepresented parts of the population in our efforts to open up government. And we're really trying to enforce, as the 10th commitment, open government community. We're really trying to demonstrate global leadership when we were co-chair, but also to build this community of open government people here in Canada. So those are like big examples of what we're doing here, and really happy to answer any questions that you might have on those. But as a matter of fact, we're kind of limited in times. So I will go back to Benoit to talk about the recommendations that we received really recently from the Independent Mechanism report.
Yeah, so we received last fall a draft of the IRM that we call the Independent Review Mechanism. So as I said at the beginning, opening the government is a journey, so we always have to learn and improve. So you will see on the slide right now is the 5 recommendations that the IRM researcher give us to to make it better here in Canada. It's a great exercise to have an outside view of how we perform. I should say that those recommendations is for the design phase of the report, so not the implementation part of it. So, but it's great to see a third party review our plan. So that gives us another perspective, and we can then improve. We're going now to a consultation, as Sarah said, for the 5th National Action Plan. So it's very timely, because we will be able to use those 5 recommendations and make sure to address them during the design of the new plan. So I would go to what is the work in process here right now. So based on the IRM that we just saw, and with our own assessment of the situation in Canada, we have a couple projects that are coming up. So last few years, because of the co-chairmanship, we were more focused on the international perspective. Now we are trying to get back to mainstream open government domestically. As mentioned before, we want to try to go, and this is a recommendation from the IRM, to solve an issue with the open government, just not open the government by the sake to open government, the government, but it's ready to have a problem-solving approach. So for example, how can open data and information can help, for instance, the fight against climate changes? So this is the kind of way that we have to structure the new plan. We're pushing hard to have more user stories, because we saw that even inside the government and outside the government, it's difficult to show benefits of opening a government. So we're trying to have user stories, people that are using the data, to using the information that we have, to have good example of and be able to show what exactly we do with the civil society and with the Canadian in general. This is the last slide. The last slide that I have right now. It's the amendment to the bill to access to information legislation. Sorry. This is the cornerstone of the open government. It's important to have access to information. So our act was not updated for the last 30 years. So this year, in June 2019, we went to Parliament, and they agreed with this new legislation. So now we have, for example, we have the title of all memoranda that's going to deputy minister and ministers are online. All the briefing material to answer to questions from parliament oppositions are online as well. So we have big kind of information at the ministerial level that are accessible to Canadians now. And just for your information, this is more maybe things that you want to look at outside, but this is some statistics that we have from that we see that the improvement of the accessibility of the data, or how data are more accessible from the past after the new legislation. So you will see in the last 2 slides, this is it. But what I want to attract your attention on is if you look who's using the data for both slide that I have, it's mostly the biggest user of data is the government employees. So the GC user, as you can see in green in both. And if you look at the region, the second circle, you can see the orange and the yellow. This is the region here, the capital region here in Canada. So we see that most of the data are reused by government employees. So when we say that open government is good for policy development, it's good because we can hear from citizens, but it can be good as well because it's a sharing tools for the department as well. So it's help us to be aware of what's happening inside our own government and stop to working in silos. So this is the end of the presentation. I don't know if you had any questions for us.
Benoit and Sarah, thank you very much for this great presentation. Thank you for participants to staying. I will definitely encourage the participants right now, online and on site, to prepare your questions. I know they have to leave soon in Canada. We're going to try to stay here as much as possible in Belize to respond to any questions, so continue deeper on any comments and observations that you might have. I think both presentations have been very instrumental for what we want to accomplish in with the project. This is something that we wanted to be or to expose you with. In Belize, Canada has got a great experience. Is of course a different dimension in terms of the size. Of course we can see the numbers, big numbers in terms of data sets published and things like that. But the essence of what they had experienced, it's great. And as I put on the chat, a lot of that cycle that was presented is something that we want to recreate in Belize with support of the OGP, of course, the project and other partners such as the Canadian experience as well. That's something we're going to be working on all together. Again, I invite you to stay tuned with the project and the next steps. Very important. A very important line of what Benoit just said at the end is that they noticed government offices are also high users of the data. That is very important. Open government for a while was pursuing and pushing for always building capacities and activating the non-government actors to make use of data, and that's important. It has to continue happening, but government, and I noticed there are several government offices representing here in this chat. They can also be users of the data and benefit. We have seen that also in other countries happening. Just to name one, in the case of Colombia, agricultural. Climate data that was often then used and reused by the Ministry of Agriculture, developing tools for small crops and so on and so forth, fisheries and so on. And so there was a way also for those government offices to benefit from that data, innovate, generate new services, applications, and that's very important. So thank you very much to Sarah and Benoit in Canada. I just have one question for them while people send the questions on the chat. Maybe you can respond to that one quick. And I have a question about your Open Government Directive. You mentioned, you talked to it. I want to know.
Okay, thank you. So yes, I can answer to your question. So the directive was done here in TBS because it was it was at the beginning of the process that we developed the directive. So it was mostly based on an open by default and open data. We consulted with the department. I'm not sure because I was not here at the time how it was consulted with the public. But I know it was consulted here, and we are now reviewing the directive, but it's mostly a directive for department, so it's not from the for a policy per se. It's really a directive to show how to implement the open government. So now we are in the way that we are more mature. We are in a maturity level that we were not when we developed the first iteration of the directive. So we're now trying to update it with the view of how we want to be in the future. And this is what I said, that we want to make them more center on other department, make the department, the federal department, accountable for the responsibility to be open, and how can we how can we support them to have the buy-in from the senior management. So this is how we structure the new iterative of the directive.
And one of the key point of the directive is that, you know, our departments, they all have data sets in their goals. And one of the requirement of the directive back, I think it was in 2012.
2012.
It was to make an inventory. Each department had to make an inventory of all their data sets, and knowing what they had was kind of a realization from their part, and later on they could like decide which one they wanted to open. So I think this was really a great starting point for us in our open government journey, just to assess what we had in terms of data sets.
Thank you very much to Sarah and Benoit there in Ottawa. There's two questions, one from Juan Pablo Ruiz and from iNovel as well. I want to respond to or give some comments to Juan Pablo Ruiz's questions about what percentage of the population is using open government platforms. Are there any specific features, deliverables that have significantly increased usage rate? So I'm going to respond to that one specifically, and just by highlighting what OGP has recently mentioned, and even current CEO of the OGP, it's been telling the world, right? You can find it on the webpage as well, and Pepe or Gustavo, one of them, mentioned it as well. There are 78 countries and a growing number of local governments representing more than 2 billion people, along with thousands of civil society organizations and members of the Open Government OGP of the partnership. That's just, if you see open government as a platform, right? 78 countries actively promoting it, actively developing their commitments, actively fulfilling the commitment. Some of them are specific commitments, fulfilling specific areas, services, policies, and you activate those ones for greater usage. Of course, it doesn't work the same in every country. Some countries, go to the forefront, whereas some other countries just don't do so. They go on a different pace, and of course, you see countries. You see countries who have developed 5 or in the process of developing their 5th national action plan, whereas some other ones are just starting, right? Ecuador, for example, just recently joined the Open Government Partnership, and they're in the process of developing and co-creating their first action plan. It will be different than what happened already on countries, or what is happening in countries who are developing now the 4th or 3rd, 4th, or 5th national action plans. And one thing, just to close this comment on that question, it's that increased usage is based on how the cycle and the ecosystem, including government, it pushes to promote, obviously, taking advantage of the different platforms, open data, and resources available for open government, and that's very important. So as long as the ecosystems start getting stronger, there will be definitely more an increased usage. But most importantly, you will increase the usage and taking advantage of open government if you really connect with solving with solutions, right? With needs. You can open 400,000 open data sets and be using only 1% of it. So the rest is not being used. You did open government because you open data sets, but the public is not definitely engaging on it, not using it for many reasons. They don't know how to get there, or just really what's the common thing is just that they do not find attractive, needed, important the data that was open. So it was open from the perspective of the institution who had some information ready and available, published in an open format, but never really understanding the needs of the citizen out there, or those third parties, non-government actors, intermediaries who can really make sense of that data and add value over that data, either if it's social or commercial value, to really generate a massive use. So a very important bottom line, anything you do, try to see it from the perspective of the end user, those ones who are in need, or could be a specific service, instead of doing it from the other perspective of what do I have ready now to open, without really knowing if it's going to be of any impact. That will be it on my side right there.
Yeah, I just want to add, and your comment was very great. So for the last part of your comments, I just want to say that it's very important to know your data and make it to have, if you have a portal and you want to put data on it, it's the way that it's useful data. So at the beginning of our journey, we just like try to put as much data as possible, and it was not the quality data, but we were going for the quantity. But we realized at one point that was not the way to do it. So it's better to have useful and great data that will be useful for citizens more than the number of data sets that are on the website. I just want to go back to the question that was asked. So it's difficult for us to assess what is the percentage rate of Canadians that are using the portal or the platform for us for open government. It's mostly the portal because it's not. I would not say that it's a very useful, use-friendly tool. It's for people that know the data and are able to play with it. The goal to have this portal is to make sure to make the people aware and make some people to do some tools with it. So do new apps or new stuff. So we can see. The most important is not the people that are going on the data, but on the portal, but it's the way that the way that people are using it, and how can it will increase how it can have a benefits on Canadian life. So it's if we can have a company that we are using it for, let's say we have here an application that is for buses, and it's called Transit, and it's taking the information on the open, and you can see exactly where is your bus, when your bus will be at your stop. So it's those kind of information. People are not going per se on the portal, but it's have a big effect on their life.
Thank you, Benoit. That's correct. I don't know if you can just read through the iNovel question there about how scalable the current platform is. But I want to add something while you do that. And again, it has to do with how you, what your strategy, right? How you actually build your strategy for openness. The more you engage with the end user, in the process, the more you're going to know the results and the impact of that data. If it's a specific data, we're really open data focused right now in this conversation. So you'll get to know that if your ecosystem is strong enough, if there is really proactive communication back and forth and so on, you ended up knowing at a good extent how that information is being used and taken advantage of. That's very important. So it has to do with your strategy in engaging end user, non-government actors, intermediaries from very early on that stage. The other thing is, as a principle, and this is very good to know, as a principle, when you are working on opening either data or just implementing open government, one of the principles tell us that, or the principle, the goal behind is just to make sure that we're open. And then, so therefore, if you want to interpret it this way, somehow not stop worrying so much about how that information is going to be used at the end, right? You open it for a specific, with a specific goal, good intended. But then the traceability and how you traced what happened after, It will take a lot of effort, and it kind of like somehow interferes with the principle of openness. Yes, you want to make sure that you continue building. Maybe you help in the processes after all, but it's not necessarily the main focus on the principle of it. So you definitely take advantage of that once you strengthen your ecosystem and there is good communications in the process. Otherwise, you're gonna kind of lose that connection between the further impact of it. You ended up knowing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cases, something that is very tangible, but there's many other things happening that you don't and knowing in academia, in private sector, different users who are taking advantage, generating value over that you're really disconnected to it. Sometimes it's just one thing that leads to another one, like a bypass. Get the data, somebody transforms somehow that data, another one starts using it and transforming it as well. So it's difficult to trace. Go ahead in Canada if you have anything to add, Benoit.
Thank you. No, I'm good. I'm good with that. So this is a great answer. And I just a question about the software or the platform that we use. So we are currently using CCAN as a platform for our system. So it's an open source, and someone asks where. So I don't know exactly where, but we can provide that. It's not an issue.
Yes, I should add to it, just from a regional standpoint of view, CCAN is the most used platform by countries of this hemisphere, with a few exceptions actually. Other ones are used successfully, and it's got a working group, a support working group behind it as well. That's not just to say that is the only one, of course, but is widely used. I'm not promoting it neither, but it will have to adjust to the capacities of the country who's implementing. And in this case, you have the two options, right? One that is a proprietary software where you tie to the product and the services and so on and so forth. And one that is open sourced, and you have the capacities in-house to make sure that you can maintain it and so on and expand. You have to measure that, but we have had very nice, good discussions comparing. I do facilitate also the regional open data working group, so I know this as a fact. No, I'm just to mention again one case. Colombia uses a proprietary software, and it really looks a lot of what CCAN is doing, whereas there's some points that maybe CCAN users are using at what they're doing, and so you have everything, right? When you look at two different brand phones, right? You can look at the top phones, but that one's got better camera than other, and that the other one, and this one, might have these apps that, it's kind of basically the discussion goes, but at the end, capacity to perform, one is financial capacity, right? Because you have to have good financial capacity for proprietary software as well. Not to say that you don't need it for open source, but the magnitude of the financial investment is different as well, and so those are things to consider. At the end product, they look very similar. The end product, right? Your open data portal, they look very similar. There is a tougher question here by Sean F. Kind of recognize that name. What is the stated theory of change for the open government policy in Canada? And by extension, what are the main international development impacts and outcomes from the policy? Great question. very genuine interest to reflect this in Belize. Benoit, you have anything to add on that if you have already measured
Sure.
in
Yeah,
any way imperial
Sarah and
place
I
for
were
open
just
government policy in
discussing
Canada?
together answer to this question. So we don't have Canada a theory of change. We have the OGP theory of change that we can share the link, but we don't have per se a theory of change here in Canada. So
Mike?
Thank you. Yes, any information you can share, that will be great on that regard, Benoit. Audrey, are you online, right? I mean,
we have a couple
without,
of questions here.
go ahead.
Oh, you typed it right. Okay, so it was typed in the chat actually.
Oh, it was from Paco? Okay, so Paco, thanks for joining the session. Paco Smith has been a very active participant from the civil society side and academia as well throughout the first phase and the second phase. I know Paco well. He's got a question. Might you be able to share a bit more concerning the Citizen Initiative portal with regard to number one, its development, and two, its function, and three, its current utility? Any feedback on that, Sarah or Benoit?
Good question. Yeah, thanks, Paco, for the question. So this, I think what you refer to is the Citizen Initiative portal is the portal that we have here in Canada that I show, so where we can put our data. So the development, as I said, is a little bit is related with the CCAN program that I put the link on open source that we had. So it's not a citizen portal, it's a government portal that we are open, that it's our way, so it's our one door shop that we using to communicate the data that we have to Canadians. So we want to make sure that all the data from Canada are at the same place, and that will make it easier. We had the questions from the department, so why, if it's already in my website, why I should have it on the portal is just to make it easier for citizens. If they have to go like to 150 different kind of website, they may not have exactly what they want, and they may lose some information in their way. So this is why we have the portal, and I think this is answering as what is the function. So the function is really to put all the information together, to have only one place where people can have access to the data. So this is how that make their life way easier, and that is useful as well, because, and that's answering to the third question. So what is the current utility? So the utility is for people that want to have a specific data, so or information, because as I said before, the title of the memorandum to the ministers are now all online. So if people wants to make a request for information, they know exactly what to look for, and the data. If we're going on the data per se, it could be reused for by civil society, by other partners, and this is why we're trying right now to add a storytelling portion on our portal to show what exactly people are doing and what kind of application that they have access with the data that we make available to the citizens. So we have different kind of utilities that are function of this portal is really like to people know what is the briefing, what the kind of ministers briefing that we provide to all ministers in the government, but as well how can we use the data that we have and share it to Canadians to make their life easier. And we have to remember, and this is the message that we send to our department, the data that we have here in government is not our data. It's citizen data. So we are paid by tax. We are paid by taxpayers. The studies are paid by taxpayers. So we're trying to more and more to open it to the citizens, because really this is the data that they have. So I'm not sure if I answered the question properly.
Thank you. Thank you, Benoit. Paco will let us know there in the chat. You raise a great point that it's a recurring discussion. In every country we have worked with, helping them in developing their national open data policies. Who owns the data, right? Kind of the question that people flag in the very beginning. You responded very well. That's actually the outcome of the question in every country that we have supported, technically and actually, basically, the way it's supposed to be. The data does not belong to the institutions. I think that's something that we have also found out throughout entire dialogues. Nothing different from what will make sense. But it's part of, it will become a part of changing the way we perceive the functions of the institutions and how they handle the data and information as well. And that means to the very end, how they allocate or not, if any, formal or informal way of assigning ownership over certain over data. So that's very important. I have a very good principle. Thanks for sharing that, Benoit, and stressing the way it's perceived by the government of Canada and in Canada as well. Thank you very much. Then let me see if there was any other question there. No. So one thing I wanted to mention while we continue, and pretty much we're probably going to be closing unless Audrey tell me if there are more questions there in Belize right now on the on-site the venue, is that this is Canada experience. We heard Estonia's experience in another session, not with this network right now in this webinar, but there are many other experiences in the region and in the world, and I want to just bring it closer to this region here in Latin America and the Caribbean as well. There is a forum of exchange, annual forum of exchange called Abre Latam and Condatos. It reunites every year the open data regional ecosystem from governments and non-government actors, participated in a conference and a conference style for 8 years now, strong, pushing, continue developing and promoting open data. So I invite you all to keep an eye on it. It's called Abre Latam and Condatos. Abre Latam is the civil society organized side of that conference, whereas Condatos is the government side, organized side of the conference. And Abre Latam and Condatos both will have a lot of resources for you to take to check, including exchanges that we had in these forums on CCAN and others, but also in many other things. So you can imagine after 8 years of work, all the kind of knowledge that's there. A lot of it, I should say, in Spanish. The good thing to say sometimes for Belize is that there are many Belizeans skilled in Spanish as well. You have that dual language ability in the country, and so perhaps will be easier for some of you to navigate and a lot of the Spanish material there, but there's also English material there as well. So thank you. Just keep an eye on that as well. I'm gonna add the link to that to the chat so you can have it, click on it, search, navigate, and have it there handy. The annual conference this year is in Panama, very close to Belize. September 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, I believe. Just check on the web when I put the URL there. And if you're interested, try to participate. A very vibrant ecosystem worldwide, one of the most vibrant ecosystems worldwide on open data. Also, if you have already certain experience or case that you would like to present there will be also an opportunity to submit your proposal for a presentation or so. Just keep an eye on that, and I encourage you to participate. There was a question on if we are going to support the making of with defining our substantive areas that will be beneficial specifically to Belize. What approach will this take? Is the project will support the promotion of it, and so keep an eye on that as well. Do participate in the series and the rest of the series. As a matter of fact, one of the things that we're asking participants, and that's the way it's being communicated to you, we would like to have you participants at the end of this third seminar sending us some ideas about what do you think should be some of the commitments that a Belize action plan, open government action plan should have. So do think about it. Send us a line or two or three, depending on the ideas that you have about what do you think those commitments should be. We're going to take this also to bring it to what's going to be the on-site national open government dialogues next month. We're going to share information with you by email on what's going to happen during those events next month, so you can participate. I'm sorry. But one of the things we're going to do is take your ideas that will come out of these seminars as a baseline of proposals for commitments and discussion during next month's roundtable dialogues. So that's a way to engage. Now, the project per se will not establish the commitments. We're going to support the process, but if any, will identifying, defining, finalizing commitments for that action plan. It's going to be you, participant here in this chat, with the rest of the extent of the open government ecosystem. So we're going to help in the process of enabling that, but not so obviously finalizing those commitments and so. So do participate. The process needs your input. That's very important. It needs you. We're just part of it. But at the end, is you participant in this seminar and beyond, who is going to decide what's going to be there. And of course, with the support of experts who will be traveling with us, who will be visiting Belize. Our own project team in Belize will support the process of consultations and so on and so forth. So I leave it there, most likely to close the session unless Canada has something to ask. TBS Canada has something to add at this particular point, or Audrey in Belize.
No, we're good to on our point. I just want to thank you again to give us the opportunity to be here today. It's always great. So any questions, you can follow us on the, you have the 3 link here on the presentation. So you can follow us and we'll be happy to support you on this.
We are good as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Benoit and Sarah at the extent.
I believe we are good as well here. We wanted to thank you and the speakers for the presentations.
Okay, then without further ado, I shall close this first webinar for the ecosystem. Thank you for being present online and on-site. We need you here next week as well. There will be other cases, other observations, doing actually I should just, for the sake of reminding, the next webinar, it's specifically on the issue of development of national open government action plans, principles, and world cases. We already seen some of that with Canada here, how the action plan look like, but we're gonna dive in a little more specifics about how to go about it. And for that, we're gonna have again the OGP. They worked on it in every country. They support this at every country, and also with the government of Uruguay, who's actually bringing their expertise from both sides, the government sides and how they engaged on it, and the civil society side, how do they engaged on it as well. Different from the size of Canada as a country, population and extension and so on. Uruguay, obviously, it's a lot much smaller, one of the smallest countries in this hemisphere, but not as small as Belize. So perhaps will be more familiarity in terms of how the numbers of that they do handle, and will be another perspective for the Belize ecosystem to look at. Thank you again. Thank you to Audrey and Melanie in Belize for hosting the venue on site. You can continue discussing and close the session there in Belize right now. Thank you for all the online participants. Lastly, we're going to share with you the video and presentations of this webinar.